for joining us today. My name is Kate Ford. I'm from Reframing Disability. I'm also an educator and a parent of 2 children with disability. And I'm joined today with Julie. Hi, Julie.
Hi, Kate. I'm a speech pathologist, and I've got an interest in supporting children through transitions.
Thanks, Julie. So we thought we'd start this live Q&A today by firstly introducing ourselves and thanking you all for sending in your questions to start today's Q&A. This is a series of 3 Q&As, and we're going to be talking about your child's return to school. We're also going to be outlining recent announcements that are being made by the government. And so we'll start talking about those now. Last week, the New South Wales government sent out a media release, and they talked about returning students to face-to-face learning earlier. So I'll just outline those dates here. I've got the media release from the government. So we're looking from the 18th of October, kindergarten year 1 and year 12 will be returning. From the 25th of October, year 2, 6 and 11 will be returning. And from the 1st of November, year 3, 4, 5, 7, 8, 9 and 10 will be returning. So this is a transition that's pretty huge, Julie. Parents are thinking about transitioning their child back to face-to-face learning, and also the world or our state opening up again. So transitions can make people nervous. They can make parents nervous. They can also make children quite nervous. So how can parents support their child with a disability returning to school during this time of transition?
Thanks, Kate. So I guess it's not just the transition to school we're looking at, but we're transitioning to a space that people are referring to as COVID normal. Not that there's a whole lot of what we know is normal about COVID normal, but as with all transitions, it's really important that the parents of every child, including those with disability, really look after themselves during this time. There'll be many changes for families. Some families have been working from home for the last 3 months. Some families have not been working because, you know, they may be primarily employed in the hospitality sector. Some families have had children going to school still because they've needed to be frontline health or emergency services workers. So, you know, this is a time of change. So first things first, making sure that everyone's well rested, well fed, and as calm as can be, you know, is humanly possible at such a time of change. For parents, definitely understanding how your return to work time frames, whether they match or don't match with the proposed return to school timeframes. So as you were saying, Kate, it's looking like the state is due to reopen around about the 11th, with hospitality and some other workers returning to face-to-face work. Our children begin to go back to school on the 18th. So even if you've got a child in kindy or year 1 or year 12, you're going to have a week where you're at work and they're not at school. So trying to think through, how is this going to work? What resources do I have? Does my child actually need to go back to school earlier? If you're in a position where you can't, you know, provide reasonable supervision for your child, even though, you know, their year group isn't due back yet, you are an essential worker and your child does need to go back to school a little earlier. You'll need to have a chat with the teachers at your school, your child's teacher, principal, school executive, you know, their learning and wellbeing coordinator, whoever's your best contact at your school, and plan for this change, which you might be needing to plan for on just a few days' notice as things become clearer in the later part of this week. So making sure that's all happening.
Yeah, and so schools are open
support
today
yourself
too.
because, you know, you need to be well supported as a parent to be able to provide those supports for your little people. So if your child's returning early, have that conversation with your child's school. In addition, being prepared to be flexible.
Absolutely.
You know, like so many things are changing around the edges right now. We just are not sure exactly what's going to happen, and nothing's written in stone. You know, we need to be flexible for change. So once parents have got themselves ready for this, you know, for this new normal, thinking about supporting your child through the transition. So every child with disability is an individual and is unique. Some children like lots of information. Some children prefer not a great deal of information and prefer things to not appear too different. So we can talk with children about things that are the same, things that are almost the same, and the things that are going to be better. And when we're talking about the things that are going to be better, we're talking about the things that have been modified to keep children even safer. So, you know, mask wearing of teachers will keep your child even safer. And just using that language of better rather than different might provide reassurance for some children.
That's such
So
good.
in addition to that, when we get to the day when your child is due to go back to school, whether that be 1 week, 2 weeks, a month's time, whatever that might look like for your particular child, when we get back to that time, making sure we've adjusted the routine so that your child's going to bed at a suitable time, is able to wake in time to have breakfast and be at school at the expected time for their year, bearing in mind that some schools might even slightly modify school start and end times. So making sure you know your child's getting up in plenty of time to not feel, you know, rushed in getting to school.
Yeah.
Helping your child understand anything your school has told you that might be changing. And, you know, if you've got a child that likes sameness, just making sure you've explained to them why this is better, why this is better, and how, you know, now you're going back to school and it's more like school rather than working from home. So just, you know, making that better statement and explaining, you know, the importance of keeping all children safe.
There's some really great points there. Thank you so much for sharing, Julie. Now, we put the call out to parents to please send through their questions for today. So, Julie, did we want to? I've been keeping an eye on the Facebook chat. If you
Yep.
have any questions,
So,
feel free
Kate,
to put it
we
through.
we have a question here from a parent of a child in a support class. So, if a child is in a support class, which is a multi-age class, um, will only some year groups within that class be going back to school?
Okay, so that's a great question, and thank you to our community for sending that one in. I think the first point of call is to check with your child's school. They will be able to give you the most information, up-to-date information about this. So the first point of call, schools are open today. Schools open from now. I think what made a lot of families quite nervous is we got this information through the media that schools would be opening earlier, and we weren't in a position to communicate with our schools then. Well, now schools are open. We're in a position to communicate with them. So please feel free to contact your child's school, give the school a call, or send them an email to their school email, and they'll be able to discuss your child's individual needs and give them a date for their return. I think this question is on a lot of parents' minds if you're outside of those normal return dates. So your first point of call is your child's school. Now, Julie, I've got another question that I'm going to read now, and this is from another parent. So I'm a parent of an 8-year-old with complex medical needs, compromised immune system. Some teachers have indicated that schools aren't safe, and the parent's feeling a bit nervous about sending the child back to school. So what support is available from schools? This is coming from a parent who's a single parent and working full time. So what information is available?
Okay. So it sounds like if you're a single parent working full time, you would probably be pretty desperate for your child to get back to school as soon as possible. It's really hard working full time from home and trying to home, and supporting learning from home for any child. So completely can understand why, a family would want their child back at school. In addition, the Department of Ed has said it's time to go back. So I guess in this situation, we need advice from the doctors, really. If your child has a compromised immune system, to what extent does that leave your child vulnerable to COVID? 8-year-olds aren't yet able to be immunized. We're hoping that, in the near future, there'll be some form of immunization for the 5 to 12-year-olds, but that's not here yet. Overwhelmingly, if your child has complex medical needs and has, immunocompromised, in that situation, I would definitely be encouraging you, doctor first, find out from the doctor. If your doctor says it is not safe for your child to go back to school, I'd be providing your school with that information as soon as possible, because that's really, really important to know. In that situation, your school might be able to arrange something. That schools have been supporting children going through chemotherapy and other conditions for a long time, to enable those children to come into school, and by putting additional precautions in place for other children in the class.
Yeah.
So that's definitely a conversation that needs to be happening.
Yeah.
We know that in the primary schools, it's highly unlikely any of the children will be vaccinated, given that children have to be 12 years or older to access the vaccine. So basically, the best supports for you at the moment would be your medical team, getting their advice, and then taking that advice and problem solving with your school.
Yeah. And a question did just come through the chat, Julie. You might have seen it. So someone's asking if you can ask the Department of Education to disclose vaccinated students and have vaccinated classes. I don't think anything has been discussed around this at the moment. What are your thoughts, Julie?
I don't believe so. Not for children.
Yeah.
I don't know that it. I don't know that it's actually going to be possible to disclose, which children have been vaccinated and which haven't. We do, on the positive side, know, though, that around 50% of 12 to 15-year-olds have already had their first dose of vaccine.
Mm-hmm.
So that's really pleasing that rollout's happening so quickly.
Yeah.
And bearing in mind that the 12 to 15s have only had access to the vaccine for around a month.
Yeah.
So, the second dose.
Assured as parents that, and if I talk to the media release again from the New South Wales Government, that teachers will be expected to be double dosed by the 8th of November. So there is that protection there.
Yeah. So, the adults will be, and, I'm guessing that this question must be coming from somebody who has a child of high school age.
Yeah.
Where all the children will also be having to wear masks.
Yes.
So, for children of that age, there is that added protection as well.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, Julie, let's move on to another question that we received when we put the call out about keeping our children home. Okay, did you want to?
So, yeah, I'm just wondering, how do we keep our kids at home if we don't want to go back to school just yet? So, will the department deal with it as if it's sick leave or an unexplained absence? And yeah, if I choose to keep my child home, is the school obliged to assist me with distance learning?
Okay, and that's a great question, and one that has come through on a multiple of platforms. So a lot of parents are concerned around this. But at this stage, the New South Wales Government, the Department of Education, the Primary Principals Association, and the Minister for Education have all recommended and encouraged children to return to face learning. So that is the stance for all schools. We want schools to open up. We want students to return to face learning. And so this is the recommendation. If you feel that a health professional has deemed your child not well enough to learn at school and is recommended to learn from home, I would get some documentation around this, seek some clarity from your health professional, perhaps talk about some things that your protective measures that your school could put in place for your child, but also speak to your child. I think that was really clear in the communication that we've shared so far is, speak to your school, have open, transparent communication with the school. Schools want children to return to face learning, and they want that to happen in the safest possible way. So work with your school to ensure that your child can return safely. That would be my number one advice, Julie. Do you have anything else to share on that?
Yep. So definitely making sure your child's returning as safely as possible. If your doctor, is prepared to write, it's not safe for this child to, leave the house right now. If you've got one of those little people that have such fragile immunity and they're for whatever reason unable to be vaccinated at this time, and you're in a situation where you're not willing for them to go back based on what the advice your doctor's given you, definitely share that information with the school. Your school may suggest that your child, remain enrolled in their regular school and obtain supports there, or there may be some other enrolment that's possible for your child.
Yeah, but as the Minister for Education has stated, children will be encouraged to return to face and remote learning will no longer be offered. So in this question, it did talk about distance learning. That's not going to be offered at this stage. But once again, talk to your individual school, discuss your concerns, and they can support you and your child. All right, we've got another question here from our Facebook community, Julie. Will the New South Wales Department of Education be prioritising Hepa air filters in classrooms?
Okay, I actually haven't heard anything about this in relation to New South Wales. I have been trying to keep pretty well across the media, and I am aware that Victorian schools have had a look at airflow in classrooms and all of these kinds of things. There hasn't been any information coming out in New South Wales around this. So I guess this is something that if we hear anything about, we can maybe come back to in a future Q&A.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's what we'll do throughout the next few weeks during our Q&A sessions. Any new information that comes to light, we'll share this with our Reframing Disability community to make sure that you are prepared for your child's return to school. We've got a little bit of time, Julie. Just before we started this webinar, you were talking about how you've been supporting families in practice. One thing you mentioned was getting a child used to face masks and being able to communicate with teaching staff using face masks. I know Wonder Charms put out a fantastic little cartoon resource for children to educate them on why face masks are important. But what are some concerns that your parent community have had, and how can you share those with ours so that parents feel supported?
Okay, so the face mask, thing is for our kids is a really new thing. They've been seeing people out at the shops wearing face masks now for a little over 3 months. Many of our children haven't yet tried on a face mask or worn it for any length of time. So if your child is of high school age, it's going to be really important to get some face mask practice in between now and when they return to school, because 6 hours is a really long time to wear a face mask. You might need to, have a little bit of trial and error around face mask styles, sizes, whether they're the over the ear or around the head face masks, and also supporting your child to safely remove and reapply their face masks, because the kids are going to need to eat at some point every day, and you just can't eat through a face mask. It's just really, really, not possible. So if our children have been wearing a face mask for 3 or 4 hours, we need to educate them about safe removal. And are we just sending children to school with one face mask, or do they need one for each session of the day? So we're going to have one, potentially 3 face masks a day. What kind of face masks are going to work for your child? Are you going to be looking at the disposable kind? Are you looking at fabric face masks, shaped, square? So many questions. Try it out, work out what works for your child and what they're able to tolerate. That's going to be really, really important. For some children where it's just a reluctance to wear a face mask, you might be able to get a face mask with a preferred print or pattern on it. For other children, though, the sensory issues of wearing a face mask are just overwhelming. So then it's about having the conversation with the school about what's reasonable, how long does your child need to wear a face mask for each day, and in what environments. So, your child might be able to get a break from face mask wearing when they're outdoors and those kinds of things. So that's one part of the face mask, challenge. The other part is that many of our children already have trouble reading facial expressions. So when we cover half of the face, it makes life really, really tricky. So you can simply start playing a little bit of a charades game with the face masks, where, you pull faces for different emotions, and then lift the face mask down, so, what do my eyes tell you? I'm feeling, and now you can say, when eyes look like this underneath the mask, someone's probably smiling. When eyes look like this underneath the mask, someone's possibly sad. We can play those games with our children, just to help them begin to be able to predict a little more and pick up a little more of the nonverbal communication.
Yeah, and keep in touch with your child's teacher to see how they are responding to the face mask. Keep that communication open, and you might be able to work with your allied health team to further support that. Now, Julie, we've had a question come in through Facebook. So this person, Lisa, has asked if you could discuss some strategies that we can give to our anxious kids returning to a strange new way of schooling. How do they advocate for themselves around social distancing and feeling safe?
Okay, so that's going to very much depend on the age of our children. Our primary age children, in the average primary school, social distancing is a really, really tricky thing. So where that's a challenge, I imagine teachers are going to be doing some education with all of the children around this. Often in preschools we talk about how big is your bubble? And your bubble is tiny when you're cuddled up with your mum, but much, much bigger when you're out riding your bike. And in the classroom, your bubble needs to be somewhere in between. However, in COVID times, that bubble is almost as big as your bubble would be when you're riding your bike. So talking to children, helping them visualize the size of a hoop, a large hula hoop around themselves, and, helping them think about not bumping hoops as they move around can be helpful. Around helping children visualize that social distance. So if you imagine a hula hoop is around, a meter in diameter. So if you've got two hula hoops, you're at least a meter apart. Hula hoop around each child, you're at least a meter apart. So that can be helpful for some children. Advocating around social distancing for individual children, particularly children with disability, can be challenging. This is where we need all the grown-ups on side and some teaching around, a common language around social distancing. So, talking about, maybe physical distancing more so than social distancing, talking about games we can play from a distance. If all children have sanitized their hands, handball's going to be a reasonably safe game to play. Are we going to necessarily want, children, too many children on a piece of climbing equipment? Probably not. So, there's going to need to be conversations had, but teachers are experts at teaching. And I know that they're going to be able to teach children about the need to physical distance to stay safe.
Yeah.
And as the teachers roll out those lessons, the children will have common language to use with each other.
Absolutely. And I think a lot of teachers are in preparing now for that return to class. A lot of schools, a lot of principals are thinking about how they're going to safely return children to school after the recent announcement is that face-to-face learning will be brought ahead an extra week. So Julie, is there anything else you want to add today? We've answered our questions that have come through via Facebook Live and that have also come through over the weekend, and we've responded to those in the chat. So is there anything else you want to add, Julie?
Well, I'm just wishing everyone a really safe return to school, making sure that, looking after the grown-ups first, making sure the grown-ups know what they know and know what their plan is.
Yeah.
And then supporting the children through. If you've got a week or two before you return to school, it's still a great time to try on the school uniforms, make sure they still fit, make sure the school shoes fit, air out that school bag. There's plenty to do.
Yeah.
That, doesn't necessarily involve your child right now.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for sharing today, Julie. And Julie and I will be back again next Tuesday to talk about more, if there's more recent announcements and further supports for our parents so that they feel empowered to support their child with disability back to the classroom. So thank
Thanks,
you for
Kate.
joining us today, Julie. And thank you, everyone. We'll see you next week.
See you.
Thank you.